Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sauk County Partnership for Prevention's Let's Talk Vapes and Alcohol presentation this evening. We're so glad you're here with us tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started right away. My name is Kate. I am one of your presenters tonight, along with my colleagues Sarah, Alicia, and Jody. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We ask that we just follow the simple rules of the road since we have quite a bit to cover with you tonight. Please remain on mute. Feel free to use the chat feature throughout the entire presentation to offer comments and or answer any questions and ask any questions you might have of our presenters. We are recording this event. If you share your video or your audio, this implies your consent to be a part of the recording. If you write to everyone in the chat, this also implies consent to have your words be part of the recording. To maintain your confidentiality, you may send a chat directly to the host or one of our other presenters. Tonight, we're going to cover new brain science, alcohol and vapes, as well as cannabis, what the trends are amongst youth here in Sauk County, tips for talking with youth, and actions you can take to prevent underage alcohol use, and where you can get more help and learning more as well. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Sarah, who's going to kick us off with some up-to-date brain science.
All right, I get to do the good stuff, y'all. So we're going to jump right in. But before we do, let's address what you might have been thinking when you signed up for this webinar. Maybe you thought, well, I drank and smoked when I was underage and I turned out just fine. Maybe some of us can admit that we've had that thought. And it's a really common thought because we like to make decisions as humans based on our past experience. But what we're really saying is if nothing went wrong for me, then surely it's fine for everybody. And when we dig deeper, we know this just isn't true. Let's take a look at this from some different contexts. Maybe we went without sunscreen as kids and never got skin cancer as adults. Or maybe we're old enough to have lived through the time when it was legal to ride in a car without a seatbelt. But surviving these odds doesn't make these really good parenting strategies. We got lucky, but others did not. If you look at large numbers of people, it's obvious that seatbelts and sunscreen save lives because of the evidence that we have. And the same is true for underage drinking and vaping and marijuana use. The dangers and the consequences are real, and we've learned a lot more about them in recent years, especially about the effects of teen drinking and nicotine and marijuana use on brain development. Next slide, please, Kate. So we're going to get into the good stuff here right away, the new brain science. And this is for all of us, including me, who have thought at one time, how can my teen be so smart and yet sometimes make such silly, stupid decisions, right? As our teens go through puberty, they start to look more adult, and we then expect them to think and act like grown-ups, but their brains can't reliably deliver adult-like decisions. How our kids think is a function of their brain development, and that operates on a whole separate track than the changes in puberty that make them look more adult. Until fairly recently, it was generally believed that by the time you finished high school, your brain was fully developed. But now we know that it takes much longer, at least until the mid to late 20s for most people. Car rental and auto insurance companies know this very well. They look at all the data on car crashes and see that those under age 25 cost a whole lot more money to insure. So they charge really high premiums to rent or to insure those with still developing brains. It wasn't until the 1990s that we learned just how long the human brain takes to fully develop. This is when MRI scanners were developed that could take pictures of normal, healthy brains without hurting them because MRIs don't use radiation. And what we learned is that the brain develops slowly over time from back to front, starting with the core brain right at the base of your spine there, and moving up from there. So by adolescence, the middle brain, which is your limbic system, your emotional brain, If you could kind of look inside my head, it would be right in the middle there from front to back and up to down. That part is fully developed. But the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, which is like the brain CEO, it takes until the mid to late 20s to fully mature. Our brains develop by laying down what's called myelin, which is kind of like insulation for nerve cells that enable them to transmit signals really quickly. Like think of your cell phone charger and that cord. Without the plastic sheath around it, it would transmit signals really slowly. It's the same with our brains. The teen brain has a fully myelinated limbic system, as you see here, the limbic system of the brain. And this means that their risk reward system is firing on all cylinders. You probably already knew this intuitively, right? If not the science. Feelings are available instantaneously. They're seeking novelty and pleasure and getting all that instant feedback. And in fact, their reward system is even more excitable than the reward system of a smaller child or of an adult. They get really excited about rewards, emotions, new experiences. But you know what isn't myelinated yet? You can probably guess it's their neocortex, the part of their brain that weighs consequences, helps them make good, smart, big picture decisions that are long term in consequence. So it's the opposite of immediate gratification. I'm sure you've heard the analogy before that the gas works instantly, but the brakes take a lot longer to kick in. So here's an all too typical scenario from my own life. I have two kids. My 13-year-old son gets annoyed by a comment that his sister makes, his younger sister. His limbic brain immediately processes attack, right? I'm sure you can feel my pain. It's literally without a second thought. So his myelinated limbic brain gets that impulse 3,000 times faster than his unmyelinated prefrontal cortex, which would have him put the pause on his reaction, which he does after he attacks her, right, physically or verbally, goes, huh, maybe she didn't mean that in the way that I took it. Or I could have asked her what she meant by that. Maybe if I yell at her or if I punch her, mom will get me in trouble again and things might get worse for me. I might, be in trouble. So that doesn't work. And my son, because we talk about brain development, will go, my stupid brain. And I'm like, yes, and that doesn't get you out of this, right? So what's more, studies do show that when teens are around their friends, their limbic system is like on hyperdrive. So it's even harder for their prefrontal cortex to catch up and deliver a message to slow down, right? So when your teen daughter, for example, is telling you about her plan for getting her late assignments done, she really means it. She's going to follow through with her plans. Her prefrontal cortex is more online when she's with adults like you. But then later, when she's with her friends, all the strategies for staying focused go right out the window. So because adolescent brains are still developing, they're more sensitive to stimulation of all sorts, including substances, right? And so teens learn habits really quickly, like they learn to speak a language or play an instrument. They learn this so much faster than we can as adults. But on the negative side, this also means that youth who use alcohol, nicotine, or marijuana are much more at risk than adults for developing long-lasting negative effects of that use because they learn the habit of addiction very quickly. They start to carve these embedded pathways in their brain, and they might be very emotional, like, I'm bored. Oh, I could use something for that. I'm anxious. I could use something. I'm depressed. Use. And this is how addiction gets started. In addition to being more likely to become addicted to these or other substances in youth and also later in life, there are other negative effects of use, as we all know, such as mood disorders and a permanent lowering of their impulse control. So nicotine, marijuana, and alcohol can really change the way that connections in the brain are formed, which can harm parts of the brain that control attention and learning. And those are the images that you're seeing and digesting on the screen there of a healthy brain and a brain affected by substance use. So this is all very sobering. This is the action part. What is a parent to do with all this information? So here are some thoughts for you. First, talk to your kid about brain development. They're probably wondering too why they do silly things sometimes, or why it's harder. Maybe they have the self-awareness to notice that it's harder to make good decisions when they're with their friends. It really helps them to understand that our rules as parents are related to their brain development and their ability to make smart decisions. So you can say something like, I don't trust your brain yet to fully deliver this message to you quickly, and it's a little more impartial. It's not saying you don't trust them. So you can explain brain development to them as best you can, or you could watch something together. You could watch this part of the recording together, see what they think, see if it is true in their experience. Or you could find a video online that explains this clearly. We recommend one called The Sci Show with Hank Green that's in YouTube. Thanks so much, Jody, for putting that in the chat for people to check out. I'm sure there are many others. That's just one that we found that we like. So other things that you can do, encourage them strongly to delay any use of alcohol, vapes, marijuana until they're age 21. So you're not saying never, ever, just later, right? Especially for alcohol and vapes, which are legal, right? Once you're age 21. And if they say, well, why not? Short answer, because of brain development, because your brain is still developing. This is an important one. Teach them to pause before making a choice that's not obviously smart and safe. Just by counting to 10, you're giving that prefrontal cortex time to catch up to that supermyelinated limbic system, right? That gives them messages 3,000 times faster. So literally 10 seconds can make a huge decision difference in their brain where they can be thinking more clearly. So that's a few deep breaths, that's taking a walk, that's shooting some hoops, that just letting that prefrontal cortex catch up is an easy thing that they could do. And then when you need to have tough conversations with your teen, a few ideas here, and you're going to hear more about them later. Show an interest in what they're doing, expressing your genuine interest. So if I'm going to talk to my teen about a video game and the effect it's having on him, I might start with like, oh, what's that game you're playing? I'm genuinely interested. How does it work? What are you doing? So, and then you could try making an observation, it's interesting. I've noticed that when you play this one, you get pretty anxious and irritable. And then sometimes you take it out on your sister. Have you noticed that? Is that what you see happening? And why do you think this game makes you feel that way? What are some ideas you have for keeping your cool and not taking it out on others? You notice all these questions get him to self-reflect and him to come up with his own strategies, because that's what we want as parents, is for our kids to develop their own strategies, because you're not always going to be there to set those limits for them. And if you need to set some limits, do it when you are ready to do it. Like they say, not in the heat of the moment, but when you're ready, when you've thought through, what you want those limits to be. You could say something like, you're welcome to play that game again once you have a plan for not letting it make you do things that you regret later. So we're trying to develop this self-control, self-responsibility in our kids. And that is all about brain development, enough for us to continue anyway with the rest of our presentation. Do you have any questions at this point about brain development? Please feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to use the chat too for your observations. If you notice this is what's happening in your family as well, I'd love to have that solidarity with you. Yeah, let us know what you think so far. And we are going to continue into trends of youth use, starting with alcohol. So, as you know, Wisconsin has a culture of drinking excessively. Our state typically leads the nation in heavy drinking and binge drinking, and this trend only worsened during the pandemic. We tend to drink to deal with stress and also to celebrate, to connect with each other, and to unwind. And our kids notice this behavior at a very impressionable time in their lives. It's a time when they're starting to establish their own views on alcohol, which starts quite early in life for them. Underage drinking in Wisconsin, a bit of data here, is a serious problem. So where youth here in Wisconsin, more youth have tried alcohol in Wisconsin than in other states. More tend to start early by age 13. And most youth don't think underage drinking is risky. So right here in Sauk County, we have some data that show that youth are drinking and a little more than the Wisconsin average. So this data is from a survey that's taken in some of our schools called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It's done every 2 years, and as you can see from the dates, we don't have updated data for middle school, just high school. So we know that 28% of high school students in Sauk County and 13% of middle school students report drinking alcohol in the past 30 days. So that is a little higher than state averages. Of the high school students who drink in Sauk County, nearly half of them binge drank in the past 30 days. So that's 4 or more drinks in one occasion if you're female and 5 or more if you're male. So that's really high. And then also in Sauk County, 1 in 3, 33% had their first drink before age 13. And this is nearly twice, or actually more than twice, sorry, my math is slow, the Wisconsin rate of 16%. So although youth can sometimes say that they drink to relax, we know that alcohol can actually cause a lot of problems for them. It causes depression, other problems with mental health like anxiety, anger, aggression. So even though it has a temporary lift in mood, it can lead to worse mental health over time. On our next slide here, we have our first activity for you. I'd love for you to use the chat for this. What are some dangers and consequences of underage drinking? What comes to mind for you? So we have some broad categories here up on the screen. Can you fill in the details? Please write your ideas in the chat. And note that when we're talking about consequences of underage drinking, these consequences are even worse if the child is binge drinking. So what is in your mind consequences of use? Health problems. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So there's a disruption, right, of normal growth. We've talked about mentally, but also physically. They can have hangovers, recurring illnesses due to alcohol's effect on their immune system, liver damage, heart damage from chronic use. And we're seeing liver damage younger and younger in people, like in their 20s these days. Yeah, mental health, poor coping, oh gosh, you guys are rolling now in the chat. Thank you so much. Yeah, it impacts their activities. They're losing their chance to play sports. They could have more accidents, car accidents, trips, falls, all those kinds, grade suffering, sleep problems, school performance. You all know this. Okay, yeah, consequences that are life-changing. You got it. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. You all did so well. Wondering, I didn't see up here like some social problems might occur too. Things like fighting or, just being isolated, unplanned sexual activity or unwanted sexual activity. Um, what else? Legal problems. Maybe someone put that in the chat and I didn't see it yet, but maybe that's what's meant too by consequences that are life-changing. Yeah, you all know this. Great. Thank you so much. So these are all things you can talk about with your teen. I mean, I wouldn't rattle off a whole list of them because it's overwhelming, but take a few at a time perhaps. So to close out our discussion here about alcohol, it's important to note that some teens are really being manipulated by what we call addiction for profit industries through their marketing. So we have just a few examples to share for you today. Here's one for alcohol. You can see, these are juice boxes. Who's that appealing to? That's a great question for our youth. Who do you think that's appealing to? Or Sunny D, we know the orange juice, right? Or fake orange juice, Sunny Delight. These are vodka seltzers that have vodka in them. We also see this for marijuana. You see here the berry pie marijuana product. Or for vape fluid, here is strawberry shortcake vape fluid. Tell me that's appealing to someone over age 21. I really have a hard time believing you with that. Alcohol industry, or in this case, vape industry, which, yeah, sometimes they're one and the same. And here's a final showing of all these things that look like candies and very, very appealing to our youth. So again, this makes a good conversation starter. If you see something like this, you can talk to your child about, let them come to the conclusion that these industries are trying to create lifelong customers who will be buying their products. No, they probably won't be buying Raz and Jazz, as they get older, but they'll be then buying cigarettes, for example. They're trying to get you addicted for life. So I'm going to pass it over now to Alicia, who's going to talk about trends in vaping.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks to Partnership for Prevention for inviting me to be involved tonight. I'm going to give a high-level overview on current vaping trends in our area, but if questions come up, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. As I'm talking about tobacco and nicotine, I do want to acknowledge that I'm strictly talking about commercial tobacco, so what you can buy in stores, not tobacco used for spiritual practices. So, Kate, if you want to go to the next slide. Vaping devices come in all different shapes and sizes and a variety of names like e-cigarettes, vapes, nic sticks, and mods. Foundationally, they all work the same, where a power supply like a battery heats the liquid or the pod. The user breathes in the contents of that heated liquid, which almost always contains nicotine. And then finally, the aerosol that they individual blows out. Using data from the most available youth risk behavior survey, young people in Sauk County are vaping just under the Wisconsin average at 15% for high schoolers and 5% for middle schoolers. But not all youth populations are using at the same rate, with LGBTQ plus youth, those with a mental health illness, and those with feelings of isolation tend to be at a higher risk. Other forms of tobacco are still utilized as well, so like chew or cigarettes, but vaping devices and now the nicotine pouches are most popular because they're very easy to be concealed, they're easy to hide, and they come in flavors. So while a lot of research is still needed to know the true impact of vaping devices, we do know they're not harmless. It is not just water vapor. The aerosol released contains many cancer-causing hazardous chemicals and particles that collect on surfaces, possibly poisoning or posing a larger risk to young children and pets. Some examples include the addictive chemical nicotine, benzene, which is found in car exhaust, heavy metals like nickel, tin, and lead. And the batteries are also a risk, as many have been known to cause fires and explosions, resulting in pretty serious injury. So these are not just fruity flavors and fun, harmless products. They actually can cause a lot of health and environmental dangers. I do want to provide some information specifically around nicotine, especially with the popular nicotine pouches like the Zyn pouches. As I said, nicotine is the addictive chemical in the tobacco plant. Many nicotine products today are claiming to be tobacco-free and can be used in pouches like Zyn or disposable e-cigarettes like the Elf Bar. The nicotine in these products are produced in a lab, so they're the synthetic. But they have the same effect on the brain and lead to an addiction. It was an attempt, these products going for synthetic nicotine over the nicotine derived from the tobacco plant was an attempt by the companies to get around the FDA's definition. That was that loophole. They were looking for it to continue to sell products. As of 2022, the law now clarifies that synthetic nicotine products are regulated by the FDA, like the tobacco-derived nicotine products. Although, unfortunately, it is a bit of a long and slow process for the getting them off of the shelves and going through the approvals. Those nicotine products, like the pouches and the disposable cigarettes, they actually contain a much higher concentration of nicotine than cigarettes. So we're going to see on the next slide what that looks like. So you can see on your screen how many cigarettes you'd need to smoke to have the same amount of nicotine as these e-cigarette products. So 5,000 puffs in a vape is actually equal to 25 packs of cigarettes. A Juul pod comes out to about 41 cigarettes worth of nicotine. Just staggering numbers. And we often hear of young people using 2 or 3 disposable vapes a week. So this is extremely concerning, the amount of content, nicotine specifically, that they're inhaling compared to a cigarette. So most students report they would not vape or even try tobacco products if it wasn't for the flavoring, which masks the harsh tobacco taste and irritation when inhaling and makes it easier to start and harder to quit. You often see flavors for vapes being cherry and gummy bear, cotton candy, and one I just recently heard was banana mint. It's not surprising these are marketed flavors once you realize most people who use tobacco start before the age of 18. So many of these flavors have very fun, trendy names, but do you really think that those are targeted towards people looking to quit cigarettes and that middle-aged population, or do you think that they're targeting those that are under 18? So despite the tobacco companies' claims, these products are not approved by the FDA as a cessation device. They are often marketed to get around those clean indoor air laws and allow people to vape indoors. Since these products are being marketed as an alternative to smokers, their use usually leads to people using both cigarettes and e-cigarettes. This means they aren't quitting. They're just taking in more nicotine and other chemicals. Youth who start vaping are about 3 times more likely to also start smoking cigarettes compared to their peers who never used a vape. So, what are the big dangers for these products? The addictive nicotine found in the flavored tobacco products and e-cigarettes harm brain development, very similar to what Sarah had shared earlier. It may affect memory and attention. Nicotine is actually the 3rd most addictive drug after heroin and cocaine. So when youth are consuming these products, especially at such a high consumption, they're putting themselves at risk for addiction, irreparable lung disease, harmful chemicals, learning difficulties, and mood disorders. So when you're thinking of the activities that your young people do, whether it's sports or band or art, it's impacting their ability to breathe and their heart rate. So being able to run up and down a court or a field, or to play an instrument, it's impacting their ability to learn. So remembering plays, remembering their math equations, remembering what they read for their test the next day. It has what we think wouldn't be from one small puff actually has a pretty major impact on their future moving forward. But give your young people a break. It's not necessarily their fault for turning to these products. As Sarah showed us earlier, these companies are targeting youth through their marketing, knowing that that's going to be what leads to people starting before age 18, getting addicted much faster because of that brain development, and then they're getting buyers for life. So important to address that. Not starting before at such a young age can actually keep people from starting ever. So I'll now pass it over to Kate to talk about our next substance. But if you have any questions, I'll still be on at the end, and feel free to put them in the chat as well.
Thanks, Alicia. Our next section, we're going to talk about cannabis or marijuana. Cannabis is a widely grown plant family. So there's numerous different types of cannabis plants all in that large family, and they're grown all over the world. Cannabis plants can contain more than 100 different chemical compounds, and these compounds can include delta 9 THC or CBD, two different cannabinoids. These are the most understood components within a cannabis plant by science today. We do know that THC is a psychoactive compound, whereas CBD is a non psychoactive compound. A psychoactive compound is one that affects how your brain functions, thereby altering your mood, awareness, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. In contrast, like I said, CBD is a not psychoactive compound, but it's also found in cannabis plants. Marijuana is a slang term that's used for a cannabis plant that has a high concentration of delta 9 THC that's primarily consumed for the purposes of altering your mood or getting high. Marijuana is also commonly smoked in joints like cigarettes, blunts, or using a bong or a water pipe. It can also be vaporized into an e-cigarette as well, or another type of vape device. It can also be extracted from plant material and mixed with foods like cookies and brownies and candies or gummies, and these are called edibles. Lastly, some people when inhale concentrates of these compounds. This is known as dabbing. And when you dab THC, it's highly concentrated and can also contain some unsafe additives from that extraction process from that plant. It is important to know that marijuana or cannabis plants grown today have higher concentrations of delta 9 THC, somewhere between 40 to 80%. This is extremely high when compared to the marijuana or cannabis plants grown in the 1970s, which typically had concentrations of delta 9 THC between 1 to 2%. So you may have heard it already, but this is not your parents' weed anymore. Delta 9 THC, again, is that psychoactive component in marijuana. And what it boils down to is that youth have numerous different options of consuming this compound in incredibly strong products, easy to conceal, and making it a lot less noticeable than in the past. When we look at Sauk County youth, we do know that they are using marijuana at about the same rate as their peers across the state. 13% of high school students and 3% of middle school students have used marijuana or cannabis in the last 30 days. We also know that 18% of high school students who use marijuana also started before age 13. If you remember Sarah referencing that in our alcohol section, the sooner someone starts, the more likely they're able, or they're unfortunately impacting their brain's development. We also do know that some groups are much more likely to use marijuana than others. We see students who get mostly C's, D's, or F's in school, LGBTQ plus students, food insecure students, and those receiving special education services, amongst others, and those that are amongst or identify as multiple races. Some of the dangers of youth marijuana use is that your teen brain is still actively developing and continues to develop until about age 25. Marijuana use during adolescence and young adulthood may harm the developing brain, producing temporary hallucinations or delusions, temporary paranoia, memory loss, which increases difficulty of studying, learning, remembering recent events, all something very important for a student enrolled in school. Loss of IQ points, impaired judgment, increased likelihood to engage in some risky behaviors. A lot of these should be pretty familiar as we've already mentioned them earlier about some of the risks around tobacco and alcohol and addiction in general. Additionally, other problems students can experience include reduced coordination, difficulty maintaining attention, and problems with school and social life. You may have also heard about the delta 8 THC or the delta 10 THC. These are different compounds that have been chemically extracted from cannabis plants that had a high concentration of the non-psychoactive CBD compound originally. These plants are legally classified as hemp. In the US, federal regulations maintain that cannabis plants containing greater than 0.3% delta 9 THC are classified as marijuana or cannabis, while plants that have less than that should be classified as hemp, and growing hemp in the United States is legal as of 2018. Now, delta 8 THC or delta 10 THC are those compounds that are chemically created from those hemp plants in a process that's highly unregulated and uses very harmful additives. Because these products are created in an unregulated market, product producers can say anything they want about what their products are and may not effectively warn consumers about how potent the products are or what additives were used in the process of creating them and what they might, as a consumer, be consuming. This can be very risky and dangerous for consumers as they may consume more than they were wanting to consume because the dosage instructions are not tested or correctly matched or consumed. They may consume other chemicals that they were unaware of that could cause other health problems. Lastly, it is expected that delta 8 THC or delta 10 THC will have similar impacts to youth brain development and overall health. It's just too early to tell in our research across the country. Although these products are relatively new, they are cousins to that delta 9 THC, which has documented health impacts when used by youth under 21. I'm going to pass it over to Jody to talk with you about some talking tips. But like Alicia said, I will stay on here. And if you have any questions about cannabis, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Kate. So this brings us to the whole point of why we're here. What can we all do to prevent underage drinking and vaping? The answer may actually be simpler than you think. Have small talks. Engage youth in small talks about alcohol and vapes. Small talks are characterized as short, casual, and frequent conversations. Next slide, please. So when should the conversation start? So it may be shocking to some of you here, but kids really do listen. Research shows that parents and other caring adults are the most powerful influence on children's choices about underage drinking and vaping. But most people aren't sure when to begin the conversations about alcohol and vapes. So let's ask the obvious question. When do you think small talks about alcohol and vapes with children should begin? If you look at the age groups on the slide here, I would love for you to put in the chat what your thoughts are on when the conversations should start. So on the screen, we have ages 8, 10, 12, and 14. So if you could put that in the chat, I would really, really love to hear what some of your thoughts are. And I'll just kind of scroll through some of them here. I've got 10, 8, 5, more 10s, 8s, 10s. So the answer is that while small talks make a difference at any age, research shows that conversations about alcohol and vapes should really begin around the age of 8. So why should we start talking early? This may really seem early to some of you, but here's why it's really important to start the conversations when they're young. Kids start forming their opinions of alcohol around age 8. Kids are starting to drink and vape earlier than they used to. And it's really important to lead the conversation and not follow it. I understand completely that it can be a bit scary for parents to have these talks with their kids, but it really doesn't have to be. So small talks can happen anywhere and at any time. So let's look for a few opportunities or teachable moments for parents and other caregivers to begin a small talk. So while you're watching television, you could ask, why do you think that character drinks? or you could point out good or bad behavior around drinking and vaping to show your kid your expectations. While listening to music, you could ask, why do you think so many artists sing about alcohol? While gaming with your kid, you could ask, how do you and your friends have fun? Or even walking through the store, you could ask, who do you think is the target for that alcohol or tobacco ad? So, if it's hard for your teen to open up, another great idea is to try a conversation without eye contact. You can try this no eye contact conversation anywhere, but talking when you're in the car with your teen is a really, really great time for this. A windshield conversation in the car can work since your teen is somewhat stuck with you for the duration of the ride. And if the ride is just you and them, there's kind of some built in privacy to the conversations that are going to take place in the car. Another great opportunity that I've found is that moment when you say goodnight and flip the lights off. I know for me, talking to my three boys, they were most relaxed and kind of able to open up with me just those moments before falling asleep. And that's when we had definitely some of our best talks. So here's what to do for a successful small talk. Keep it casual and consider asking permission to talk with older teens. Once we get the conversation started, we want to make it as successful as possible by knowing what to do and what we can say. There's no need for a fancy script or a setting. Just think about what you want to share with your child before diving in. With older teens around 13 to 17, you might want to consider asking permission to talk with them. Asking them if it's okay can feel like you're caving in or giving up authority, but actually asking builds respect and increases the chances that your teen will hear what you're trying to say and come to you more often for advice. So asking permission can sound like, hey, when is it a good time to talk about that party on Saturday? Or maybe, I would like to talk with you about the party on Saturday. Is now a good time? If your teen says no, respect that, but you can respond with, so this is something I'd really like to talk to you about before Saturday gets here. If now isn't a good time, how about after dinner? Or you could go the more direct route that I know I've had to take before. I don't have any details about this party coming up on Saturday, and I would really like to hear plans. Or I would really like to hear what your plans are. So control your emotions. Be prepared to hear things that you may not expect or you may not like. If this happens, just make sure to relax and only talk about your feelings when you're calm. You don't have the answer? That's okay. Don't panic. It's okay to admit when you need to learn more. Remember, you don't have to discuss everything all at once. And set clear behavior expectations. Make it known that underage drinking and vaping is illegal and unacceptable, and enforce your house rules consistently. When you make a rule, give a short explanation as to why. This helps your child take the rule and apply it when you aren't around. Keep your rationale brief so it doesn't turn into a lecture. And become your kids' go-to for information and support. Take all their questions seriously and provide calm, non-judgmental answers. So now that we know how to approach a small talk, let's look at some of the things that we can actually say for a successful small talk. You want to start by asking open-ended questions. Get them talking by avoiding yes or no questions. Ask about their friends' choices. Asking questions about friends may work better than going straight to asking your child about their own use, though that really does all depend on how you and your child already communicate. You can also ask about school experiences. Where do they see kids vaping? Or maybe their perceptions about alcohol or vape use in games, TV, and social media. Remember, why questions are hard to answer even as an adult, and teens may feel especially judged by those questions that begin with why. So consider open-ended questions that don't start with why. For example, maybe, how do you feel about drinking alcohol before you're 21? Or, what do you think about vapes being offered at school by your classmates? Or even, what would it take for you to say no the next time you're offered a vape? If your teen shuts the conversation down, though, that's okay. Just keep coming back and trying different approaches. Most importantly, listen, listen, listen. Show them that you are interested in what they have to say. Ask questions and let their responses guide your discussion. Don't dispense wisdom, but ask what they think. You might learn something. To listen well, put down your device and ask your child to do the same. You can't compete with devices for attention. And talk about the tough stuff. Kids can sometimes think of alcohol or vapes as a way to cope with stress or trauma. Give them a safe place to talk about those feelings instead. And don't ever keep score. If your kid's info or opinion differs from yours, avoid correcting them or contradicting them. It's important not to lecture them, to use scare tactics, or to shut them down with too many facts. Consider sharing your own story. What you share about your story, though, is up to you. But revealing your own choices, your regrets, or your family history may really help kids understand what's at stake. In your story, though, be careful not to glorify any underage drinking you might have done or tobacco use. On the flip side, if there are some things that your kid doesn't want to talk with you about, it's okay to find someone else for him to talk to. Ideally, this would be someone that you both trust and someone who's at least a few years older than your child. And this is important, tell that person ahead of time. Share what you hope they will say in specific circumstances. Now, no matter how many talks we have with our kids about alcohol and vapes, the reality is they will find themselves in a situation where there's pressure to drink and vape. Beyond educating them about all the risks of underage drinking and vaping, it's important we give them the tools to make those right choices when faced with peer pressure. So what can we do? Remember, small talks don't sound like talking at your teen. Rather, small talks sound like talking with them. So try some of these reframes in your next conversation. Instead of saying, don't text and drive, maybe start off with, what would it take for you not to text while driving? And instead of saying we need to talk, which of course we all know we dread that conversation, say, I'd like to talk with you without any distractions. When would be a good time today? Don't just come off with a straight don't drink alcohol. Instead, you could say, choosing to drink alcohol is a big decision. I care about you, and I expect that you will wait until you're 21. There's that expectation, making it very clear to them what you expect. And instead of saying, this should not be making you feel sad or stressed out, it's no big deal. You could say, it's hard to deal with everything that you have going on right now. I understand that. What do you need to feel less stressed? Another thing that I did with my kids that worked really well was to pick a code word. So come up with a code word that your child can text to you if they need a ride home or an excuse to leave a sticky situation. Also, always provide a safe space. Let your child know that your home is a safe space for them and their friends when they want to leave a situation with alcohol, drugs, or other peer pressures. And practice makes perfect. So practice with them saying no thanks. Before your kids go out, practice ways they can say no to alcohol and vapes, like, no thanks, I have a big day tomorrow. Or, no way, my parents are very strict and they find out about everything. Allow your kids to make you the fall guy by letting them know that they can throw you under the bus with their friends at any time. And I can actually share, I had this happen with my kids, and they used my husband, who was known to be very strict, and it worked really, really well. And if you think that your kids are going into a bad situation, for example, a party where there isn't an adult around, if your alarm bells are going off, remember you are the parent and you can just say, no, you can't go. If needed, you could try to organize some fun event that they could do instead, a movie or a concert. Okay, so now that we've given you some tips and tricks for managing small talks, you may be asking yourself, what if I mess up? It's always tough having serious conversations with your kids, but the fact is, you can't. Having a lot of talks, even those do-overs, is the point. Every attempt shows kids that you care and are paying attention. I'm going to put a link in the chat of a video that I really, really like that I think it would be great if you have time to look at it. And it's about bouncing back, and I really think it's something that might help you with some of these do-over talks. All right, next, Kate. So, how are you going to answer the tough questions? Like, if drinking is bad, well, why do you do it? That's a tough one for all of us, right? So, if you think about it for a second, I'd love to hear how some of you might answer that. I would love to read some of your answers in the chat. How would you answer the question of you drink, why can't I? So I have someone saying my brain is fully developed. Ah, people are listening. Good job, Jesse. I mean, and you could always fall back on the old adage of, it's legal for me, it's not legal for you. Okay, so we are now going to look at some other tough questions that you might face and ways that you can answer them. So, why do people get drunk? You could try saying, sometimes adults don't mean to get drunk, but they aren't always careful when they're drinking and they have too much. Or the question, did you drink when you were a kid? If you did, again, be honest. You could say something like, I did try alcohol when I was a kid, but looking back, I really realized how risky it was and how it could have affected my health. The question of, why do I need to wait until I'm 21 to drink? Or, you drink, why can't I? Just remembering to always be honest. So you drink, why can't I? Your brain is still developing, and drinking alcohol can affect the way you grow and how your brain develops. Also, it's the law. So now, as important as small talks are, that's just the beginning. We can do many other actions every day in our homes and our communities to prevent underage drinking. Let's take a look at a few ways that we can make a difference. And I'm going to turn it over now to my coworker, Kate.
Thanks, Jody. What can we do beyond talking to make an impact? As adults, we can model responsible use, whether that's alcohol or commercial tobacco. And if you drink in front of your child, we suggest you drink in moderation. And also don't talk about your drinking or marijuana or nicotine use as a way to manage your stress in front of your kids. We suggest you familiarize yourself with all of Wisconsin's laws and let your kids know that they are non-negotiable. The minimum legal age for drinking alcohol and tobacco use is 21 in Wisconsin. It is illegal to provide minors with alcohol or a place to drink unless they are your own child or underage spouse. Marijuana is still an illegal drug in Wisconsin. Make it clear that you have a zero tolerance policy with alcohol, vapes, and other drugs such as cannabis or marijuana, and that there are consequences if these rules are broken. Most kids get alcohol from their home or from an older adult or sibling. If you keep alcohol in your house, the easiest thing you can do is to lock it up. The Partnership for Prevention Coalition has free locks for your fridge or your liquor cabinet. We also have free boxes to store prescription medication. Let us know if you'd like one, and we'll send you either a box or a bag or a fridge lock to help you do that. We also suggest you monitor your teen's cell phone and social media use for talk of substance use and purchases of vapes or other illegal products. Taking a stand against underage drinking and vaping doesn't mean you have to give up your alcohol use or nicotine use. But if you do drink, we suggest you drink in moderation. Excuse me. We also suggest that you stay connected with your teen's school and ask them questions, particularly if they're in a health class, about what curriculums they're learning about, and reinforce those messages at home. We also suggest if you do have a teen that has already started to use one of these substances and comes to you for advice about quitting or reducing their use, get them some support. Talk with your primary care physician or any other trusted advisor to your family about your use development. We also suggest you connect with your school resource officers. These are police officers embedded within your schools and can help your teen navigate some of these trickier challenges. Now, today we've been talking about one subject. Um, excuse me. I'd like to touch on a subject briefly here. The reality is, as much as we do to help our kids and help our kids make the right choices about alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs, it's important to recognize when kids may be struggling and in need of help. We suggest you take some time to talk with your kids if you notice that your teen is struggling with mood swings and or a defensive attitude, specific problems at school like poor grades or poor attendance, students that are breaking family rules that they didn't normally break before, and a lack of interest in their regular activities or their favorite activities. When you do talk to your children about your concerns of these behaviors, we suggest you do this alone and you can be straightforward. I'm worried about you because insert what you've been observing. And we also suggest you get help if you need it from your child's doctor or school counselor or mental health therapist if they already are seeing one. We do have a word about drug testing. Our advice is never to drug test your child without his or her knowledge. Trust is paramount, and if your kid tests positive, you now have a big problem because they didn't even know they were being tested. But if your kid wants to be tested as an exit strategy, they can always use the statement, I can't, my parents drug test me. They could feel really comfortable using that as an exit strategy from some of those tricky situations Jody mentioned earlier. We do want to point out on our coalition's website, we have a Sauk County Youth Mental Health and Substance Use Resource Guide. This is a guide with numerous pages about different agencies and services available to teens here in Sauk County when it comes to promoting their mental health, getting them help for mental health concerns, as well as getting help for substance use concerns as well. This is updated regularly and can be found on our website both in English and Spanish. At the end of tonight's presentation, after the survey you take, if you provide us our address or your gift card, we will send you a printed copy of this resource. Our coalition does encourage everyone to come join us. We like input from all community members from all different areas of Sauk County, all different age parents of teens to little kids to college students. We meet on the fourth Thursday of every month from 1 to 2:15 p.m. We meet in a hybrid fashion, so there's always a Zoom or virtual option, and those that are joining us can visit us in person in Baraboo. If you can't attend one of our large meetings, we do have some short-term action team meetings or other specific activities that we always need volunteers for. You can sign up for a monthly e-news and to hear about all of those short-term action teams on our website, which is www.p4psoc.org. Tonight, I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Alicia for joining us. Alicia comes to us from the South Central Alliance for Tobacco Prevention. This again is a very similar coalition to Partnership for Prevention, focused on preventing commercial tobacco use and connecting individuals to treatment and cessation resources across 3 counties here in the South Central area. Their website, if you Google it, has also tons of specific tobacco-related resources and connections to treatment. We also want to mention Credible Mind. Credible Mind is a website that helps you manage your different life challenges. Not sure what that something isn't just right feeling is, or wondering how you can feel more engaged in your relationships and your community? Credible Mind is a website with thousands of videos, podcasts, apps, books, and online tools covering over 200 different topics relating to mental health and wide range of topics. This is vetted by a team of experts so that you can trust what resources are connected and shown on Credible Mind. To visit Credible Mind, you'll go to saukcounty.crediblemindcom to check out all of the different sources of information they have there. Lastly, we do want to thank you for coming to our presentation this evening. We will stay on for a few extra minutes here and answer any additional questions we haven't already addressed in the chat. But tonight, after tonight's survey, or excuse me, tonight's webinar closes, we'll be emailing out a survey to tell us how you think we did, helping you understand what current trends are, what current and up-to-date brain science is available, and why delaying youth substance use is so critically important. Please complete this survey. At the end of that, you'll be given the opportunity to submit your information to receive a $20 Quick Trip gas card as a thank you for spending time with us tonight. Gas cards are available to be mailed to Sauk County or neighboring county residences. We do not offer any digital gift cards, and it's limited to one per household while supplies last. Our contact information is here up on the screen if you'd like to get a hold of us, but let me go ahead and check the chat to see if we have any questions we haven't addressed. And anyone else on my presentation team, if you've got a question and an answer you want to address right away, please jump on in.
Yeah, I wanted to take Bonnie's question about energy enhancers because caffeine, y'all, is a drug. I know it's our drug of choice, and sugar, another main drug of choice, both highly legal. So, yeah, I think it's a great question, Bonnie, and it could be a great way of starting the conversation too, because your child might be like, "Oh, I'll never drink," or "No, I would never vape," and well, let's talk about caffeine and sugar, shall we? So just first to know what they're consuming, like I just read in a 32-ounce bottle of Gatorade, and that is a big bottle. There are 14 teaspoons of sugar in that. And in these energy drinks, there might be as much caffeine as 1 to 3 cups of coffee. So knowing first of all, like what is in that drink, because it just tastes like oranges, right? Or something like that. So knowing what's in it to start, and then kind of knowing your kid and what they might be, I would say, most invested in. Like you could say, you could get really jittery from drinking that. Like you might think it gives you good energy, but you might end up with like stomach cramps and shaky and feeling miserable, and once they've felt that, they'll want to avoid that in the future, and they'll see, oh, this might not be a performance enhancer. This could actually make me feel worse in my sport, if I'm nervous and jittery, and no one wants to be nervous, right? And especially in sports, you want to perform well, and that nervousness can lead to poor performance as well, or they might have headaches or trouble concentrating, like all that stuff, and trouble sleeping. I mean, who wants to have insomnia? So these are things that might really speak to your youth. And if they don't, or if you want to get into a deeper conversation, I really like talking to my kids and other people. I geek out on the brain stuff, as you can tell, but the whole concept of there is no free lunch, meaning what comes up comes down. So you might feel really good on that sugar high, but then you get super irritable in about, half an hour, depending on your metabolism. Or, you might feel really good with that caffeine in the morning, Sarah, but caffeine I get addicted to pretty fast. And your body knows that you're going to take it if you have it every day at the same time, or for a particular event, even like if your body knows that you're going to have that, Powerade right before that sporting event, it compensates already. It's like, okay, we know you're going to do that thing that makes you way too excitable. So we're going to start pumping in sleepy hormones before you even drink that caffeine to make you even out, and that's what tolerance is, and why if you drink coffee every day, you're tired in the morning because you drink coffee every day. And that is a hard one for us to swallow as humans. So these are some strategies you can talk about, but it's why, like, kids who or adults who use marijuana, like, it makes you really happy, but then you get really unhappy and depressed because your body's like, oh, you don't need any more serotonin. You're on overload. So let's, take your serotonin levels way, way down, for example. Bonnie, you also asked a really good question about, like, what are kids up to in sports these days? I think that's a great question actually to ask your teen, like, so which sport is into doing what drug, like, I don't know, you might get a lot of information, but we definitely would say it depends a lot on the culture of the team, the culture of the school, the culture of the city, like how acceptable is underage drinking, for example. It depends on so many different factors. So yeah, I would encourage you to ask about those sorts of things from other parents or from youth. They probably will give you a lot of info.
Thanks, Sarah. Alicia, did you want to address, is vaping a big deal with athletes? And what are the big deals for kids in sports?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it a bit on during the presentation, but I can re-highlight. Vaping does, you think about it, the only thing that should go into our lungs is fresh air. And so when you vape, you smoke tobacco, even marijuana, if you vape THC, the students do, that is causing some irreparable damage to lungs. And we know that when you're playing sports, your heart, your lungs, your cardio system, it's so valuable to helping you be successful at the sport or the activity. And so really emphasizing that these products can actually slow you down and can make it harder for you to run across the field or down the court, or even in volleyball, those short sprints and high levels of speed or track, let's say. The other piece behind it too goes back to like your memory and your ability to control your emotions. So if you have a competitive athlete, and they're using these substances, and then they're getting more, let's say, aggressive or impatient, they might start making silly mistakes in their field or their sport. They might start getting angry about a decision the ref or the ump made. And now all of a sudden, they're getting a much larger penalty and are getting potentially disqualified from the rest of the game because they were arguing back with the particular adult. And it's a lot of that comes down to that emotional control, learning plays, right? Brain development, being able to remember and recall that information. All of that is in fact impacted by substances, but specifically, and including alcohol, but specifically with vaping and cigarettes and other substance use that is consumed. So it can have a really major detrimental impact. And we know a lot of students who just really value their sports. They want to play in college, maybe they want to go professionally. They could have a huge impact on their future choices.